yeah, I think indie publishing is so great because there are just so many books now out there that wouldn't have been otherwise. So, um, I'm really glad I went that way. And even like with the middle grade, I think you just have to have a different mindset.
Hi, welcome to Coffee and Real Talk for Writers, where we get real about the writing life. Writing might be a solitary activity, but becoming a successful author is anything but. So grab a cuppa, pull up a chair, and let's talk. Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of Coffee and Real Talk for Writers. I'm your host, Talina Winters, and I'm recording this on Thursday, February 24, 2022. And I'm very excited today because today is my first podcast guest interview episode. That was super smooth. So this intro is actually going to be audio only as per usual. However, once we get into the interview with Jessica, we did that over Zoom. So there is actually video. If you go to YouTube and you wanted to watch it, you could. But before I get into the interview, there's just a couple of things I want to talk about. First of all, thank you very much to Brenna Bailey Davies for commenting on episode 7, which was about branding challenges for multi-passionate creatives. And the question of the week that week was, what's your biggest branding challenge? If you don't have any, but you've solved some before, what was it and how did you solve it? And Brenna says, my biggest branding challenge was figuring out what I wanted my editing business to be, whether I wanted it to be just me or other editors as well, and how to reach my ideal clients through my brand. I ended up hiring a brand designer and rebranding at the beginning of this year, and it has proven to be a good decision so far. And Brenna's website is under Book Martin Editorial now, and I have to agree, it's looking fantastic. It does a really great job of representing what her brand is all about. So I haven't hired a branding designer for myself, although I have offered that as kind of like a, I'm not even sure I've ever actually charged for that service. I have offered my opinions on other people's brands before. Whether they wanted them or not. Just kidding. No, I've had people ask me about it before because I do teach classes about branding. But as far as a paid service, I'm not sure if anybody's actually asked me to do that. However, I think it's just brilliant that she went ahead and did this, and it certainly shortcuts the process of branding. Oh, I did actually have somebody help me once. I just remembered. My community offers it has a service called Community Futures, which is actually a business, but they did offer me a free consultation on my website branding once, and that was really, really helpful. I did that after creating my new website a few years ago, and just having someone kind of walk through it with me was really, really helpful. Anyways, I had a wonderful high. Last Friday morning, I woke up to an interview. My book, The Undine's Tear, which is book 1 of my Rise of the Grigori series, had been interviewed by a major Christian speculative fiction publication called Lorehaven Magazine. And they had just tagged me on Instagram, and that's how I found out. And I was shocked. I'm not a person who necessarily goes out seeking the validation of these kinds of things, other than that reviews are super helpful. So yes, I seek reviews all the time. That's not what I mean. I don't typically these days go like, I'm not a person, for instance, who feels like I need to go get the validation of being chosen by a traditional publisher. If and when I ever publish with a traditional publisher, it would definitely be a marketing move, part of a marketing strategy for me. It's not something that I would be like, yes, please pick me. It's like, how can we work together? That kind of collaborative process. But I do confess that several years ago, when I first launched Undine's Tear in 2019, of course, with a new book, you're always trying to get reviews. You're trying to get visibility. That's one of our biggest challenges as indie authors, is obscurity. And so at the time, I still had my old cover, and Lorehaven does have a review service where you can request reviews. And I had actually submitted Undine's Tier to them at that time, requesting that they review it. And they said no. And so when I got this surprise review, I was, as I said, very surprised, but it also felt a little bit like winning an award. And so even though I don't usually seek that validation, boy, did it feel good. And the reviewer loved it. And then I thought about it, the more I thought about it, I was like glad that I hadn't gotten the review back then. First of all, they probably rejected it partly because I wasn't marketing it well. Like, I still didn't have a really great book description for it, and the book description I had was probably pretty misleading. But also the cover I had, even though it was a pretty fascinating and eye-catching cover, was not the right cover for the genre the book actually is. I was still kind of figuring out what my genre was, who my ideal readers were, and at the time, it was the only book I had out. I did have my prequel novella out, but that isn't really, it wasn't like something that people would have really read through to necessarily that would have made me money. At the time, it was actually only available exclusively to my newsletter, which I'm thinking of doing with it again, but I'll save that for another episode. Anyway, but point is, now I have my marketing in place, like the packaging is all in place, and I know that it's solid. I'm getting lots of interest in the book now, and I have a second book. So not only will the attention draw people into reading this book, but they can actually continue reading on if they so choose. So anyway, that was great. But in case you're wondering, I was a little curious. I'm like, well, what will the results of this review be? Because they shared it widely on their social media platforms. I shared it on mine, of course. And I'm not sure. I know that they have a newsletter because I'm signed up to it, but I'm not sure if they actually send out reviews in a newsletter because I haven't seen it come into my inbox. Maybe it will go out later. And I think they put it into their regular magazine. But again, I'm not really sure about that. So the point being, though, after the weekend of all this publicity and this amazing review, I sold like 0 copies of that book. Which, by the way, right now there isn't much of a marketing push. I'm not putting a marketing push on it. I'm waiting until I get the 3rd book out before I really start heavily marketing this book. So it's going to be a few years. I am doing low-level marketing, like. I've tried ads on this book and I haven't had much success with it. But I'm going to be trying a blog tour, which I've never done before, starting in March. So I'll let you know if I get any results from that. I did have a BookBub on this book, an international BookBub featured deal. I had that I think I had it in November, right before Sphinx's Heart released, which is book 2. And it didn't even pay for itself. It was a 99-cent BookBub deal. Didn't pay for itself. I did move a lot of copies. Didn't see as much read through as I'd like. So I'm trying not to be discouraged by it. The people who love this series really, really love it. And there's people who just don't. And also there's lots of people who download books for cheaper in one of those deals and they just don't read it for like years. I'm totally guilty of this myself. I own way more books than I could ever possibly read. So yeah, as I said, it's just something that what I'm mostly focusing on with this series right now is kind of building that low-level buzz and getting the social proof that I need so that when I do release the 3rd book and I want to start heavily promoting this series and putting some marketing wheels in motion for it, that I've already got a lot to work with. Okay, so moving on. My progress this week, I have nearly completed the editing project that I'm working on, which is due tomorrow, and I will finish it tonight or tomorrow morning, so right on time, and that always makes me feel good. Not only was it right on time, I didn't have to super stress myself out to do that, which is even better. Also, I've added several chapters to my sweet small town romance manuscript, Every Star That Shines. And I've mentioned that I'm kind of like, I was stressed out about this. I mean, as you know, I was like going through all kinds of existential angst and kind of tossed out my outline last week. And I didn't really toss it out. But at this point, that outline is more like a guideline than an actual rule, which outlines always are for me. But I'm way more into the trusting my gut territory at this point than I normally am when I'm like 3/4 or like 2/3 of the way through a book. I am basically still following the outline, but at every scene and every chapter, when I get there, I look at it and I look what I planned, and I know why I planned that, but I've gone off of that original plan so much that I kind of look at it and go, okay, based on what has actually happened in the story, what do I need to change? How can I make this work? And I'm still generally headed in the same direction that I'd originally planned. It's just that I'm taking a detour. I'm taking a different route to get there than I planned. So if I get lost, I will re-outline. But right now I'm just kind of working it chapter by chapter, which is how I would have to do it if I re-outlined anyways. Hoping this saves me time, because quite often if I do go ahead and re-outline, then I change something else, then I feel like that outline was wasted. And as I said, I'm not that far off of the original plan because I know what beats I need to hit, essentially, and I'm pretty solid on my character conflicts. So it's just how those conflicts are working out that is changing a little as I go. Speaking of character conflicts, yesterday I felt like something was a little bit missing with my heroine's conflict, and I needed to beef it up a little bit more. So I spent some time thinking about that, which courtesy of my cats. My cats have recently gotten into this "we are yarn terrorists" phase, which is not great because I, of course, am an avid knitter and I have been known to even decorate with yarn. So there is a lot of yarn laying around, and they can destroy a ball of yarn, I've discovered, in less than 2 minutes. I discovered that this morning because they were hardly ever unsupervised, and yet, this morning, they destroyed another whole ball of yarn, and they tangled it up with a ball of yarn I had spent 2 hours yesterday untangling and winding. And so I was very thrilled with my cats this morning. I was thinking they really want to be outside cats, but I did not quite actually throw them out there because it's still pretty cold out and they do not have winter coats. But I was not happy. However, anyways, yesterday, because they had also destroyed a ball of yarn yesterday morning, I spent 2 hours in the afternoon untangling that yarn, thinking through my story at the same time. It was actually kind of a nice little break. And then last night I did write that scene out, wrote a whole chapter out, and I did spend a little bit of time yesterday afternoon after I was done untangling, just kind of jotting down some notes about that character conflict that I needed to work through. And it really came through really well when I wrote the scene. So that was good. The book is currently just under 50,000 words. I'm still anticipating it to land at about 72 to 75,000 words. And I'm definitely not panicking about it like I was last week. However, I did do some creative procrastination this week. Besides the untangling of the yarn, which I don't feel like was procrastination. That was actually really good use of my time. Because the project they destroyed is something I'm actively working on finishing for my knitting business. So I needed it to be detangled for that as well. Anyways, but I did creatively procrastinate by listening to dozens of samples on the new Find Away Voices marketplace, which if you haven't heard about this, is just it's a newly opened platform on Find Away Voices, which is audiobook production platform for indies. But now they have this marketplace where narrators can post their work and you can actually contact narrators directly. I believe it's similar to what ACX did in the past, which is Audible's indie publishing arm. I've never gone directly through ACX, so I'm not 100% sure on that, but it seems like it's a similar idea. However, I'm again, not 100% sure on this, but I do think there is some kind of a curation process on Find Away Voices. I don't know. What I do know is I spent hours and hours this week listening to samples, and of the people that were on there, most of them were very prolific and quite qualified narrators. There were a few that were obviously just starting out, but they still had really good quality samples, and I didn't feel like it was a waste of my time that they were even on there. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. And the advantage of going directly with the narrator, well, there's a few things. I have produced an audiobook through Findaway Voices before, my novella, The Water Boy, which is the prequel audiobook for my Rise of the Grigori series. I produced that through them and used their curated, like, you have like an account rep kind of process, which was great for finding the narrator since it was my very first audiobook project. I appreciated that. However, I very quickly got frustrated with it because I wanted to have a much more direct hands-on contact relationship with my narrator, and everything we said had to go through this middle person, which became very, very frustrating. Other than that, they have a comment system where you can put comments on each chapter or whatever that the narrator produced. And in my case, the narrator would put up his work one chapter at a time as he was doing it. So that was nice, but it did make it tricky. Like, I would have liked to have just been able to email back and forth about some things. And eventually when the project was over, I was able to contact, like, the narrator has social media and stuff. So we were able to contact each other in other ways, so I could ask him about doing future projects. And so we did eventually get over that. But as far as the project itself was concerned, it's like we were almost contractually bound to actually go through the Findaway Voices system for everything we wanted to communicate. Again, I found it super frustrating. So I'm really, really excited about this. And also now that I've done that project, I've done the Deep Zen AI narration in December. I'm just very much a hands-on person, and I suspect I'm not the only indie author who is this way, because many of us do this because we just are control freaks, let's admit it. Yeah, I actually spent, these hours, and I was looking for narrators. I was mostly like, the next project I'm going to get narrated, I'm really hoping to actually start putting my Peace Country romance series into audiobook not terribly long after I start publishing it in other formats, once I see what the reception is like. However, the reason I'm choosing that is partially just a feasibility thing. The books aren't going to be as long as my Grigori books. Also, I'm expecting that they will have more immediate and wider appeal, and I know that romance readers are voracious. I know several personally that tell me they pretty much only ever listen to audiobooks, and they go through 1 or 2 a day, which blows my mind. But anyway, romance readers are amazing. I would really like to get my Rise of the Grigori series made into audiobooks. Like, that's a dream. But considering that each of the books is going to be at minimum 20 hours long, Sphinx's Heart is going to be more like 40 hours long, that is going to be hugely expensive. Like, I did price it out once. I did get a narrator that I contacted directly to send me an audition once, and I thought I could afford her, but then I found out that her fees were separate from her sound engineer's fees, and together it came to a rather stupendous amount of money for a book that is still, I'm not really marketing yet. So that's going to wait. However, that didn't stop me from coming up with a short list and finding the perfect narrator for the series for when I get there. So I have now several narrators picked out. I just need to get the budget. So anyway, it was something that the procrastination is something that will pay off eventually, just not there yet. Anyways, I'm going to try and move along here because we're already at 18 minutes and I'm still not even into the interview with Jessica. The lows for the week, it was a pretty good week for the most part, other than that I did this procrastination because I was stressed out, pretty sure, and I just needed a way to feel like I had a little bit of control over my life. And that comes back to, like, the world is still really hard. More hard stuff happened this week. More hard stuff happens all the time. It's going to keep happening. And hopefully it will ease off at some point, so it's not like everything is in turmoil all the time. But I had this thought today that, like, it's been said a lot through the pandemic that we're all in the same storm, but we're all in different boats. And it just occurred to me today how apt this analogy of being caught in a boat in a storm is. And I feel like we're not in some of us are in really big boats. I'm not in a big boat. I'm in a small boat, I feel like, because that's where my tolerance level is right now. And when you're in a small boat in a storm, I mean, I'm in there with my family, but sometimes it feels like all you can do is hold on for dear life. So you might see folks in another boat. Speaking of cat terrorists, my cat just tried to snag some of that yarn that I just finished untangling from my desk under my nose as I was recording. Not impressed. Anyway, we're all in like I'm in this boat holding on for dear life, and I can see folks in other boats, and occasionally I'm in a position to help them a bit, but mostly when you're in this situation, you're just trying to survive. And I feel like I've been in survival mode a lot for the last 2 years, which is, I think, partly why my mental health has been fluctuating quite a bit, especially this winter. And I've often felt guilty for how poorly I'm handling the storm and how little I'm able to help others through it, until I thought of this analogy today and realized that, when you're in survival mode, you just got to give yourself some more grace. Yeah, we help each other as much as we can, but when most of your resources are just going to surviving, you don't have a lot left to give other people. And it's not like I'm doing nothing, because even this podcast, for instance, is actually, I mean, it's serving several purposes for me, but one of the main reasons I wanted to start it was as a way of giving back to the community. And so, I am doing what I can. And still, it seems like the storm in the world is about to calm down, and then something happens and the winds pick up again. So I am ready for a break. I don't know about you, but it would be nice to have some calm seas and a peaceful harbor. Preferably a tropical harbor. If Maddie Dalrymple ever listens to this podcast, she's going to be all over all these nautical metaphors. Hi, Maddie. Anyways, okay, so one resource I wanted to mention this week, I actually just finished reading it today at lunch, and I started it last night. So it's a really short book. It's Newsletter Ninja 2 by Tammy Labreck. And if you've never read the Newsletter Ninja book, I highly recommend that you get the hints right now. Just go buy it and download it, and so you'll have it ready to start at your earliest convenience. It is such an amazing tool, such great teaching on there on one of the basic things we need to do for author marketing, which is to nurture our email list. This is not to replace that book. This Newsletter Ninja 2 is actually focusing on reader magnets, what Tammy calls cookies, which is just fun, right? Who doesn't want a cookie? It's not very long, but it does pack a really powerful punch, and it was super timely for me because I've been rethinking my newsletter strategy lately and my reader magnets in particular. Once I'm finished with this manuscript, I'm planning to do a little bit of take about a month or so and kind of rework and do some writing and get some better get a better strategy for my reader magnets. So this was a really helpful and timely read for me. Just came out a couple weeks ago. And of course, Tammy has just this hilarious teaching voice, which is the same as her actual voice, which if you want to hear that, she was actually interviewed on the Rebel Author podcast, episode 126, just this week. And she covers the highlights of the book in the interview, so you could go check that out if you want to kind of see what the book is all about before you go by. Okay, so on to the interview with Jessica Renwick. Before we dive in there, though, I want to apologize for the sound quality of my mic during the interview. We just did it on Zoom, and I used just my earbud microphone thingy. And as I was listening back to it, I realized it's not great. So I'm going to definitely need to get a better setup for the next interview I do, but still, it's not terrible. It's just not going to be quite the same as what you're hearing right now. Anywho, onwards.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee and Real Talk for Writers. I am super excited to have my very first podcast guest today, Jessica Renwick. And Jessica is a friend of mine. She's part of the mastermind that I've mentioned a few times. And also she has been, we have been author friends for many years.
A long time.
2016 or 2017, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually Jessica was one of my first editing clients as well, once I decided to go pro per se. So yeah, I'm quite familiar with her work as well. And I'm very excited to share it with you. She has appeared on my blog a few times, so I will link to those posts in the show notes. But before we dive in, I'm going to just read a quick bio. Jessica Renwick is the award-winning author of books about friendship, courage, and being true to yourself. The Book of Chaos was her first novel and the start of her fantasy series for middle grade readers, and the series is called Starfell. Since then, she has also published the second and third book in the series, a paranormal mystery for middle grade kids, and a sweet romance series for adults. She lives in central Alberta, Canada, with her loving partner, 2 pocket monsters, her dogs, and a flock of chickens. And Jessica, I have to know why you call your dogs pocket monsters.
Because they're small and they're furry and they behave like little monsters sometimes.
That's funny. Well, Lucy is certainly small, but Vader's not all that small anymore, is he? You have what? Lucy's a Shih Tzu, right?
Yes, Shih Tzu mix. Yeah,
Shih Tzu mix, and Vader's a
poodle.
A poodle. Okay.
Yeah, purebred poodle. Yeah.
Well, they're both very adorable. If you guys want to see her dogs, go check out Instagram.
Yeah, I post them a lot on there.
Well, thanks for coming to have coffee with me today, Jessica. Are you drinking coffee or tea? What do you got there?
Tea.
Yeah, I got tea today too.
Yeah.
I had my coffee this morning. If I have any more, I wouldn't be able to sit in this chair for the interview.
Yeah. It's too late for coffee.
Definitely. All right. Well, let's dive into the interview. So as we read in your bio, you independently published both middle grade fantasy and sweet romance, which is under the pen name Jessica Ann Renwick. And you also do copy editing and proofreading for fantasy and romantic fiction. So tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a writer and editor, and why you chose independent publishing, and how you got into editing. Boy, that's a lot into one, right? But just go for it.
Okay, I'll try to keep it as short as possible. I have always been a writer, like since I was a kid. I guess I wrote my first novel when I was 13, which was like not publishable at all, but I did it. I think it was probably like 100 pages, but at the time I was really into the Saddle Club and Thoroughbred and all those horse books. I grew up with horses, so I was a horse crazy kid. So I wrote a story about some friends that rescued a horse named Peanut Butter.
Oh, that's a great name for a horse.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So anyway, my mom was really cute. This is my first foray into publishing. She helped me print it all off, and this was back in the 90s when you had to mail in big manuscripts. And we just looked in one of my Saddle Club books and sent it into the publishing house. I think it was Bantam Books, maybe.
Okay.
Sent it into them, and then a few months later I got a really nice rejection letter from them, but they were so nice and were just like, sorry, we don't publish books written by children.
Aw.
So
you can imagine the editor who had to write that rejection letter, right?
Yeah
So like, she's so young.
Yeah, but I mean, so that's actually a fond memory I have of my childhood and just tried to do it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and after that, I mean, I still kept writing. I never really did anything with it though. Adulthood kind of took over, college, all that, getting a job. Until I was in my 30s, I started getting more serious about it again. So I started writing more. I would say the Book of Chaos must have been the first novel length one I actually finished after the one when I was 13. I wrote some other short stories, like shorter fiction and stuff like that, but I never submitted them. I never even really shared them with anyone. And then probably in my early 30s, I just decided like this has been a lifelong dream of mine, and if I'm going to do it, I may as well do it now. I had this story idea for the Book of Chaos, which actually came from a D&D campaign, which is Dungeons and Dragons, for those not as nerdy as me. um, my partner is our DM, and which is like the person who runs the game.
Yeah.
And he asked me to write a backstory for my character, who was a halfling sorceress, and a halfling would be like similar to a hobbit. So I wrote what turned into, well, it was supposed to just be like a page. I ended up writing him like 5 pages of a story, and then ended up turning that into a middle grade novel. Obviously, I changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
Fable she's not a halfling in my book; she's a human.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where the idea for that series came from, though. And I find like role-playing games like that really do get my creativity going. So I definitely pull a lot from that kind of stuff.
That's so fun. You know, that just reminded me. I mean, I've heard you tell this before, but this is the first time it's reminded me of how Peter Brett got started with his Demon Cycle series, because he wrote a short story that ended up becoming the first chapter or 3 chapters or something of his first book. And yeah, I'm like, it's not, I mean, I just think that's so cool that that's how that came about for you with Fable. It's just,
Yes,
inspiration is everywhere.
it really is. And you know what? That campaign ended up going for over 4 years.
Wow.
And so I was Fable for over 4 years. And my partner even brought in elements from the story. He ended up bringing in Endora as one of the bad guys we had to face, and the book. Yeah, so it was lots of fun that like he read the book and brought all of that into the game we were playing. So that was cool.
Oh, that's so fun. Talk about getting to know your character well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So then from there, how did you go on to then, like, why did you go on to publish romantic fiction? And then how did you become an editor? Like, how did that all tie in?
So there's a lot.
We've got time. So this is the longest question.
Yes. Yeah. So with the romance, I just wanted kind of a change of pace. I find like switching a genre after being into a world for so long, kind of just refreshing creatively. And it's so different to write, that it was just, yeah, refreshing. So I wrote a few of those before going back into, or well, kind of while going back into my 4th book in the Starfell series. So I got into that. I wanted to write sweet and clean romance because of I like romance. And then also being a middle grade author, I really didn't want my name attached to anything that, parents may find not appropriate. And I really didn't want kids like searching my name on the internet and something like that coming up. So that's kind of my image, is the sweet and wholesome, I guess.
Yeah.
Even though I write about, dragons and witches and evil things in the Starfell books.
Right. They're actually scarier.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would totally, if I had teenage girls instead of teenage boys, I would totally let them read your romances, because they are
Good.
perfect for that. So
Perfect. That's good. Oh, and as for editing, I wanted to become an editor after working with you. So with the Book of Chaos, when I decided to independently publish, I obviously wanted it to stand up to traditional standards, especially with middle grade, because you're in a sea of traditional books. So to compete with them, you need to be up to their standards. So that's why I hired you as my editor. And it was such a good experience. And it just leveled up my writing like so much to work with a professional editor. Like, it's worth every penny. And it just changed everything for me. So after working with you, I thought, this is something I would like to do with other authors as well. So I went back to school, I guess. I went to, I just took I took a course through Writer's Digest University, and it was
Cool.
their copy editing certification. And I
Okay.
highly recommend it. You do need to have some background in English before taking it. Doesn't, start at the bare basics, but I had gone to school for a teacher originally and had taken a lot of English. So I had that base knowledge, but it was a fantastic course and a work from home course. So it was good.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, it's been so cool to see you grow as a writer, but I've also really appreciated how you've allowed me to grow as an editor also over our work together. So yeah, that's been awesome. You're a dream client, Jessica.
Thank you. I want to be. I want us to, have a good working relationship and make my books the best they can be. So
yes, I want your books to be the best they can be too. And we got some exciting news that we'll probably talk about later in the episode about that. So yes, that has all definitely paid off for you.
I guess I did have an agent for the Book of Chaos at one time. But it didn't sell. It did get in with a publishing house for review, but they didn't want it. So, but that still boosted my confidence in the fact that an agent wanted it and the editor at this publishing house liked it, but it was like a marketing issue. So, even though it didn't work out, that was still a boost of confidence for me that, okay, I might know like a bit what I'm doing here.
You bet. Yeah. For sure. All right. So what have you achieved that you're most proud of?
I think the Starfell series, like it kind of surprised me how well it's done because, often as an indie, we're told indie authors, can't do it, can't compete with trad books. And then when you get down to kids' books, both middle grade and picture books, people, even other indie authors, will often say, it's not worth it. You should get traditionally published. So the fact that it's, done a lot better than I expected, that whole series, not just the Book of Chaos, but the other two books as well, has been, I've been very happy with that.
Awesome. Yeah. That is huge though. I mean, and you're just finishing up book 4, starting book 5. I mean, the series, you've got quite a few books out now. So that is definitely something to be proud of. So what's the biggest challenge you faced so far in your career and how have you overcome it or are in the process of overcoming it? Is it that finding that middle grade audience as an indie or?
Yeah, I think Imposter Syndrome for sure.
Okay.
Finding the audience, it's just different than it is for adult genres. I do have a newsletter, but it's, kids age out of middle grade.
Yeah.
So it's usually like parents or if you're lucky, teachers, because they won't leave your list, but it's a lot of parents. And once their kids get old enough, they're not reading that age group anymore. They don't really want to stick around. There's no reason to. So, so I do have a newsletter, but it's not quite the tool that it is for like adult series. And same with social media. Like again, I have parents and teachers following me, and but I find my social media, I talk to a lot more other writers, and especially writers of middle grade. But for finding my audience, I've honestly found Amazon to be great for online sales. Like,
good.
Yeah. And also I've done school visits, which is something, adult genre authors don't do, but those have led to lots of sales. And I've even sold a class set of the first book. And yeah, and those are fun because kids are like the best readers to have. They're so enthusiastic. They're so fun. I went to one class and it was before the third book came out. It was between the second and the third. And all the kids had drawn a picture of what they thought the cover of the third book was going to look like.
That's awesome.
It was so awesome. It was just so much fun. And that was a big surprise. I didn't know like that they were doing that. So yeah.
Well, one of my most fun memories to do with your books was when I was doing a book signing at the chapters in Red Deer, and this little girl who has been about 9-10 years old came up to me with her dad, and I don't write middle grade fiction. I think her dad was there to buy one of my books for his wife. But I asked her what her favorite book was, and she just had the biggest grin on her face, and she was like, "The Book of Chaos." And I'm like, "Really?" I said, "I edited that book." She's like, "Whoa, cool." So like her dad wanted a picture of us together. And I was just like, I'm not even the author. Like
That's so
kids are
cute. I
great.
love that. And I do book signings at the Red Deer chapters too. So I bet that's where she got it.
Yeah, probably. Or actually, you know what? I think she might have been at one of your, like she might have been in one of your school visit classes.
Maybe.
I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure. But
Yeah, 'cause
yeah,
I've
it
done a
was
few in Red
it was
Deer,
pretty
yeah.
fun experience. So
They're so fun. Yeah.
I love kids. I love them.
Yeah. But I will say, as for the biggest challenge, the imposter syndrome is the biggest for me. And it's like just an ongoing thing that I have to
Oh,
just keep
I hear
dealing
you.
with, right? And I think like especially with middle grade, my book is in there with a lot of trad books that are like phenomenal. So
Right.
yeah, I can feel scary sometimes. And it's always scary to put yourself out there. But I have done a lot of work around that, and even just taking a step back to look at everything I've done to better myself as a writer, the courses I've taken, working with you, like I'm always striving to improve my craft. So I feel like the work I'm putting out there is the best that I can, and I have done the work to try and improve my skills. So it's I don't believe that I'm just putting not great stories out there. So
I agree. I think you're doing awesome.
okay, thank you. Thank you. So that helps, like, to look back and say, I'm not just sitting here writing something and throwing something unedited and, never learning anything. I've done the work to like get here. So it has to be okay.
Yes, and it's finding the audience, and so
Yeah.
what really matters, I guess, is that people that our work resonates with people,
Yeah.
and
And the certain, like, you need to find the right people, because not
yeah,
everyone will like your books, and that's okay. Even the best written books are not liked by everyone. You can look at big name authors like Stephen King, and they'll have a ton of 1-star reviews,
yes,
and like his books aren't for everyone, and neither are mine.
No.
So
I've actually done that. I've gone to Goodreads and looked up, like,
yeah.
I read this one book that was like a Nebula Award winner, and I went and I looked at her reviews, and there were so many 1-star reviews, and I was just like, well, if she's going to get 1-star reviews, I guess
we're all gonna get them. Yeah.
like I just need to get over it.
Yeah. We need to grow a thick skin. And
Yes.
I don't find the 1-star reviews generally helpful. Usually they're, well, not all the time, but they can be a little bit mean-spirited. However, looking at the 3-star reviews are generally helpful, because people tell you, like, people in there will say, this is what I didn't like, this is what I did like, and you can learn from that.
You can also learn a lot of times that they just weren't your target audience, more than likely.
Yeah. And that's what I find. The 1 and 2 stars are generally, it's someone who doesn't like fantasy or whatever genre you're
Right.
writing.
Yeah. Even the 3 stars, I was really surprised, because I can't remember if it was Amazon. At one point, one of the booksellers would actually put like what each star rating meant. And number 3, the 3 stars, I think, was I liked it. And so I've actually known people that, like, a book that I would rate 5 stars, like this was a really, really good book, that was their 3-star rating.
Yeah.
To have 4 stars, they would want to have to read it again. And 5 stars was like, it was mind-blowing. I want this in my collection. I will tell everybody about it forever. And that's not how I rate books, but it just helped me remember that, like, not everybody, not everybody rates books the same. And I think you see more of that on Goodreads, that kind of
than on the retailers.
Yeah, because on Goodreads, the people who are there are really passionate about books, and they need to have a little bit maybe more nuance between how they grade books, which is why I think you see a lower star rating there generally.
And you also have to remember, those people aren't rating it for the author. They're rating it for themselves.
Yeah.
So there
As it
or
should
other
be.
readers and for
Yeah.
other readers. So, they want to go through their own list and say, oh, this one I loved.
Yeah.
To remember like what they want to reread, or if they want to like write a review on their blog or something, or recommend it to friends, right? They're not for us. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I struggle with that a little bit myself, even when I'm leaving a review on Goodreads. It's like, okay, I didn't really care for this book, but that doesn't mean somebody else wants. So like, because it's also my personal record, then I'll put the rating, but then I'll be like, remember to unclick. I don't want this to go to my feed. I don't want this to be broadcasting to other people that this was a horrible book, because that could just be my taste.
And somebody else might just love it. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just probably wasn't the right audience. So
exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so Imposter Syndrome. Is there any other tips you have for getting over that? Or
I did read a really good book recently that really kind of shifted my mindset. It's called The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women.
Oh yeah, you were telling me about that.
I believe the author is, I want to say it's Valerie Young. I'm just going to double check here. Yes, Valerie Young is the author, and it was so good. It just really explained why a lot of women and minorities have these thoughts, and just how ingrained they are into us by society from the time we're kids. So it was really helpful, and she does give a lot of like advice on how to change your thoughts. So
I'm gonna have to read that, because I got a little dose of a little humongous dose of imposter syndrome this week. So like, as you said, it never goes away.
It's an ongoing journey. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so that you might have already answered this next question, but maybe not. What is something you've done that goes against common wisdom, but which you are glad you chose to do?
Oh, definitely publish my middle grade books independently.
Nice.
I always just think like how many great stories are not out there because an agent or publisher said no.
I know, right?
And it's not even that they're bad books, but there's so much that goes into, like, for publishers, they want to make money, so they really look at market trends and what's hot, what's not. So like, if vampires are a big thing at the moment or not, or there's just like so much subjectivity that goes into it. So yeah, I think indie publishing is so great because there are just so many books now out there that wouldn't have been otherwise. So I'm really glad I went that way. And even like with the middle grade, I think you just have to have a different mindset. It's harder to find information on how to do it successfully because most of like the author groups and courses are really geared toward adult genres. But I will, if anybody is interested in middle grade or picture books, independently publishing them, I highly suggest the self-publishing book by Karen Inglis. I believe it's called How to Publish and Market a Children's Book. Now I can't remember the full title.
I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes.
It got me going. It gave me confidence. It got me going. Gave me the confidence to approach schools to do school visits. And she has a huge section in there on marketing, and she just revised it, so it's even more up to date with everything in there. So it's awesome. So anybody considering writing kids books, I highly recommend it.
And have you like taken any courses or anything from her as well, or is it just the book and away you went?
Just the book.
Good for you.
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot with other middle grade authors who are indies as well, so we can share our experiences, what worked for us, what didn't.
Right.
It's still, yeah, there's not really, I don't believe I've seen any courses specifically for kids books, but it might be something people want to Google. But
yeah, cool. Yeah. If they wanted to maybe find a great authors group for children's and middle grade books, do you have one you'd recommend? Yeah,
on Facebook there's a group called the Society of Middle Grade Authors. for middle
Okay.
grade writers. And it's fantastic. There are both trad and indie authors in there, which is actually really nice, because you can hear people's experiences both ways, kind of help you make your decision on what you want to do. And they talk about craft and book covers and all sorts of stuff like that in there. So I think in the middle grade world, having trad and indie authors talking together is good, because the way the genre is, it's dominated by trad, and the indie authors really need to fit into that mold.
Well, I'm impressed that there is such a group, actually, because I don't know, it seems like the segregation between, I mean, the lines are blurring more for other genres, but there still seems to be a little bit of separation between the trad world and the indie world. Like recently I started looking, specifically when out looking for writers podcasts, and I found a ton I had never even heard of. And as I started going through them, I realized these are all geared towards traditional publishing and traditional writers. I'm like, that's probably why we haven't heard of these people. But still, I'm still putting my, like, trying to get familiar with them. But like, the point being, I think we need to kind of cross those lines more. And I was just listening to the Creative Pens in between episode about the merger between Draft to Digital and Smashwords.
Yes.
And it was so, have you listened to it? It just came out this morning.
I haven't listened to it, but I heard about the merger. It's big news. Yeah.
Well, this is actually the second interview already I've listened to, or third interview about it. And I really liked it because just the general tone of it was so hopeful, and just the vision, because you know how Joanna Penn, she's so futuristic and vision oriented. So she was really able to get Kevin Tumlinson and Mark Coker talking about their vision for going forward for what was happening here. And the vision of what they have for the indie author industry as being kind of like this viable, like really alternative to Amazon and like even traditional publish, and just to have all authors working together and all retailers, like that whole rising tide thing.
Yeah.
Love my hands. This is what I do when I'm podcasting, but normally nobody can see it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I just think it's so cool that you have this, that with middle grade, you guys have this group where that is like crossing lines. And I hope to see that kind of thing happening in other genres as well. So yeah, anyway,
I think we need more of that. We're all authors. There's no right or wrong in which way you want to publish.
Right. Yeah. It's, and you know, it can be a per book decision.
Yes. There are lots of people that do that. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I guess with my books now, I guess I'm like a mixture, because my audiobooks are trad, which are coming out. The first one's coming out in March. So
yes. Why don't you tell us about that now?
Okay, sure. So I guess that's another thing that, well, we'll see how it works out. I think it's going to work out good. I'm already excited about it. But so audiobooks are obviously a huge industry now, and it just keeps growing like every year. And I enjoy listening to fiction audiobooks. So
me too.
But it can be quite expensive to produce an audiobook on your own, and a little bit overwhelming on figuring out how to do it as an indie. There are ways, and there are lots of them that do it well, but it was expensive and a lot for me, especially because you need to do the whole series. There's no point in doing book one and not the rest of the series,
right?
Because then listeners have nothing to move on to. So
right.
And for me, if I see there's just the first book and they didn't bother doing the rest, I wouldn't even want to listen to it, because I don't want to get involved in a story and not be able to finish it. So anyway, so I actually submitted to Podium Audio just to see what would happen. They don't have any other kids books, so I didn't know. They mainly focus on fantasy and science fiction. So I submitted Starfell just to see what would happen, and I signed a deal with them a month or so later, and I'm excited about it. The first book, so the Book of Chaos is coming March 15th. The pre-order is up on Audible, so you can find it on there in pre-order. And they picked an awesome narrator. Her name is Reba Burr, and she's done a lot of like voice work in anime, in animation, in video games. She's done some acting, so she's really good. She did Victoria Schwab's City of Ghosts series,
Mhm.
which she just did an amazing job on those. So I'm really excited. You know, she's an actress, so she does the different voices and actually performs the book. Just doesn't just read it. So
Oh yeah, I went to her website and I listened to her voice reel for kids animated stuff, and it was so cute. Like she just did so
Yeah.
many different things, and she does great with accents. I was like, oh, this is gonna be so cool.
I very much looking forward to getting the samples.
Oh, that's exciting. And just in case anyone hasn't heard of Podium, they do primarily work with indie authors, right?
Yes, they have some trad as well, but most of the big houses do their own, right? The big
Right.
trad houses, they do their own audiobooks. So they have a few trad, but it's mostly independent authors.
So it's the kind of thing where you would go and you would submit and then possibly get to work with someone. And so I thought it was so cool when you said that you got this deal, because not only, I mean, because they don't have middle grade kids books.
Yeah.
Up until now,
yeah.
You're the first, but not only that, they've kind of like your rep there is really, she's really on board and, you know, really excited about you being the first basically of many, hope, I think is the impression I got. Is that true?
I think so. I hope so. I think
kind of like a flagship product.
Yeah. I mean, I know, so middle grade typically doesn't sell as many audiobooks as adults. However, it's growing. Like I've looked up the statistics and it's starting to grow a lot. And I've had kids at school visits ask me if I had audiobooks because they listen to them in the car. Living in Alberta, a lot of kids play hockey, which involves driving all over the province.
Yeah.
And I remember that from my childhood. Both my brother and sister played hockey. I did not, but every weekend you're in the vehicle driving all over. And the one little boy said that they always listen to audiobooks.
Yeah.
On their way to hockey. So I think it's growing, and it's great.
Yeah. When my kids were young, I had audiobooks playing in the car or the van all the time. Yeah. So I think there's definitely that market. And even though your books are middle grade, I think younger kids could enjoy them, especially in an audio form. So yeah, I think that's going to be so cool.
Thank you. I'm excited.
I'm just fangirling a little. And I was going to ask, do you find that you get, like you were saying earlier, that you get parents that kind of fall away as their kids grow up, but do you have parents who become fans of you, like on their own behalf?
I have had reviews and emails from parents saying that, you know, I stole my kid's copy, or I read way ahead of my
that's
kid.
awesome.
Yeah. So they are, you know, even though they're middle grade, I would say they're kind of upper middle grade. A little bit, like a bit similar to, you know, they're not the same as Harry Potter, but they're similar in that I guess the tone or the maturity.
I've only read the first Percy Jackson book, but it actually would strike me about the same as Percy Jackson.
Definitely. Yeah. So, you know, adults like me, like I'm in my 30s and I read a ton of middle grade books because I love them. I love being brought back to being 12 and having an adventure. And I think there's a lot of adults who do. So yeah,
they're great. And you know what? It's funny. I mean, I'm advertising young adult books on Facebook, but I have so many like guys in their 60s and up that click, which surprises me. I'm advertising about epic mermaid fantasy and I'm not sure how many of them actually read, but
you know what? There's a huge portion of adult readers who love YA. Like yes. And I love YA too. Yeah. Yeah, I read YA too. So, you know, I read across all ages.
Yeah, pretty much. I'll even pick up a good picture book if it's recommended to me.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's some that are just so cute. Yeah.
They are so sweet.
Yeah.
All right. So besides forging this trail as an indie middle grade author, have you ever tried anything in your career that's paid off in unexpected ways, like just like marketing wise or whatever, like risks you've taken, whatever? Besides the audiobook thing, I guess. I mean, that was a risk, but hey, look at that.
The audiobook thing worked out great because I didn't even know if I'd get a reply. Because I went through their catalog and there was no middle grade. And I was like, but you never know. So I submitted.
That's right.
So there's that.
Good job for not pre-rejecting yourself.
Thank you. And then I guess, I know there's a lot of advice out there saying not to bother entering awards. And I think that's probably true for adult genres. But for the middle grade, what I have found is that teachers and parents want to see some legitimacy to your work. And, publishers do provide that, right? Like looking at like a Scholastic book, right? They know that it's going to be safe for their kid.
Yeah.
So I did win some awards. I entered the Children's Literary Awards, which is done by a group of libraries actually in the Midwest of the United States.
Okay.
And so I won that one, and with the Book of Chaos. And then I've done the reader's favorite reviews and gotten the little 5-star medallions that way too. Yeah. And I really do think that at least for middle grade or YA or picture books, it just adds that like this book has been vetted. It's good for the age group. They say it's good for to it. I was at a book signing in Calgary and I had a dad come up to my table and tell me that he had just read the review for the Book of Chaos on the Children's Literacy Awards site, and that review like sold him on it. Like that's what he felt comfortable buying it for his daughter. Yeah.
I think that's a really valid point because like when my boys were in elementary school, I homeschooled them for the first several years. And I mean, as homeschool parents, you go through an awful lot of books, but you don't necessarily have time to read them all yourself. So you really do rely on those third parties to validate whether it's something that you want your child to read. That's probably how I got introduced to Goodreads, was actually trying to figure out how appropriate something was for my kid. As I would just go and I would look at the reviews on Goodreads. And so, yeah, I think having those awards and those, like, even from Reader's Favorite, which is, like it's not like it's the, what's that Canadian one?
Oh, yeah. The Aurora.
Well, the Aurora, but I'm thinking of like the ones that like, like Wrinkle in Time and stuff would.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember. Anyway, but but still somebody, you're right. Like somebody has taken a look at this book and said, this meets genre standards and excels in them. So
and the reviewers are all like librarians and teachers.
Yeah.
And,
the reviews
people
are
that
good.
know what they know genre, they know what they're talking about.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I find too they must train, like the Reader's Favorite must train how they want their reviewers to review, because they usually give like a little summary in the first paragraph of their review that doesn't give spoilers, which is really nice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I found they do that for my books too.
So yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, that's very cool. All right. So what is something you've tried? Because this is the Real Talk podcast. What is something you've tried and have decided it isn't for you, and why?
Okay. So the ebooks for middle grade, I barely sell any.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So and I do this for my sweet romances, but the newsletters that a lot of authors are encouraged to use, where you do like a 99-cent sale or have it free for a period of time. Yeah. And then you send it through like Bargain Booksy or e-Reader News Today. Those kind of sites they're awesome for adult books.
Yeah.
Awesome. For middle grade, nothing. Like they are not worth the money. Or for me, they weren't. I've tried them all. They just like a fraction of the downloads as what I'd get on my romances. So I
That makes
don't
sense.
bother to put my dollars there. My dollars are better spent running AMS ads where they target other middle grade books. And that, that's where shoppers who are shopping for middle grade books will see. So for me, for middle grade, anyway, that tactic didn't really work. I will say a BookBub did help. I
Okay.
did. So the BookBub is like the mother of all email
Yeah.
newsletters that authors want to get because they just have such a huge, huge audience.
So that's the
So
BookBub featured deal, just to clarify,
yes,
right?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, not the new release deal, the featured deal.
Yeah.
It still didn't get even close to like adult books will get tens of thousands of downloads, right?
They can.
They can. Yes, they can.
They
Yeah.
don't always.
No. The Book of Chaos didn't get that near that many. But it was still worth it because the middle grade is, I think it was $110. Whereas, in the higher genres like thrillers or romances, you can be looking at $800 to $1,000 for a BookBub. So
Right.
it was worth it. And I did actually have a big increase in ebook sales, like to the rest of the series for like a tail end. And I got some great reviews, which really always helps. It always helps to get good reviews on your books. And I'm sure I found some readers that, I saw some more signups to my email list and stuff too. So the BookBub, if you can get it, I applied to it for like a year and a half before I actually got it. But just keep doing it every month. Just apply because they get so many submissions. And they can only, I think, take 20% of submissions each month. So just keep trying. And then that was a year ago I got that. And I'm going to start applying for another one this spring, I think, because I think it's been long enough that they'll have like new people.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Oh, very interesting. And so I'm just kind of curious. So the things you found work for middle grade are like a lot more the in-person stuff, right? Like the school visits and stuff, which of course have been really curtailed during the pandemic. But you said, I think you've told me that you did some Zoom ones with classrooms and stuff. So
Yep.
How did those turn out?
Actually, they turned out pretty good. They're, not quite as fun as being there in person.
No.
But no, they turned out pretty good. Generally those ones were a bit shorter and mostly just me reading to them and answering questions. But I mean, especially during the pandemic, the kids needed that. They need,
Oh yeah.
a break. Yeah, a fun break. Yeah.
For sure.
No, those turned out good. But I will say I sell majority of my books from AMS ads for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. People are
Which is
on Amazon looking for books.
Exactly. And that's a whole learning curve as well. So
yes,
you can't just jump into that willy-nilly because you have to learn. And I have taken courses for AMS to learn how to use it effectively. When you get into paid advertising, it's very easy to overspend and not get the return. So you have to learn how to do it so that you're targeting the right people and bidding the right amounts and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. Are there any courses you'd recommend?
So Brian Cohen has a great 5-day challenge that's free.
Yes, I've taken that. It's awesome.
And he just lays out the bare basics of AMS ads. And I mean, he does go a little bit deeper into it too, but like just to learn the ad dashboard and the platform and like how the different types of ads work. It's totally free. And that is the best starting point that I've found. And then Mark Dawson has a really good advertising course.
Have you taken that?
I haven't got through it all yet because he delves into AMS, Facebook, Pinterest, everything you can think of. And so I have not got through it all yet. And I still haven't found a way to make Facebook ads work for me. But I've narrowed my vision this year to like getting really good at one thing
Yeah.
before trying to add more, because I was kind of spreading myself a little thin, like between AMS and Facebook, and
Yeah.
so I was just like, no, I need to get my AMS ads like really going good, and I'll worry about learning Facebook later. And Facebook's going through so many changes right now too, so I
Oh,
almost
they
kind of
are.
want to wait until all that's leveled out and see, because I'm imagining the great thing about Mark Dawson's course is that he keeps it up to date. So once you buy
True.
it, you're in there for life, and he'll update it with the platforms as they update. And then, but for AMS, I am doing Brian Cohen's ad school, and I just started it, but it's been really good so far. So I do recommend that as well. But do the challenge first, the 5-day
Yeah.
challenge first, and see if it's for you, because it's a lot. Like, they have
It
a lot
is.
to learn. So
I did the 5-day challenge in early, I think it was early 2020.
mhm.
That feels about right. I learned a lot. Mostly I learned that my packaging and my marketing weren't yet up to the point where people were wanting to click through and pay for the book. Once I got there, got the ads going pretty good. but
that
that
he's
was
good
huge.
for that. Yeah, he's so good for that. Like, not just the ads, but how your book is packaged, how
Mhm.
your blurbs, your cover, like all that stuff. It's
Yeah.
so important, because you can run all the ads in the world to your book,
Yeah.
and it's not going to sell if it doesn't look on target, if it doesn't look quality, if the blurb doesn't pull people into the story. Like, it's not going to
Yeah.
sell.
And it's not even necessarily a quality thing, because I had really good quality covers, but they
Mhm.
weren't the right covers
For
for
the
my
genre.
genre.
Yeah.
And that makes such a difference.
Mhm.
That can be this huge learning curve for new indie authors,
Yeah.
is learning that your cover is a code. Basically, it's a marketing code that triggers in readers' minds whether or not they want that book, if that book is going to deliver the thing they want. And you have always done so well with your covers for both your romance and your fantasy series. They're awesome.
Thank
So,
you. And I
awesome.
attribute that to trusting professionals.
Yeah. See, that's the problem with me. I micromanage a little too
Yeah.
much, I think.
Yeah.
But eventually then I learned what to do, and I
Yeah.
learned not to micromanage. And now I have these gorgeous covers.
You do.
Also, I learned to make my own romance covers. I was
Yeah.
gonna just say quickly too, I think that because I've discovered for Facebook that I've struggled with advertising my YA fantasy on there, but I'm
Mhm.
doing well with romance. And
Yeah.
so I wonder have you tried Facebook ads for romance?
I
Okay.
ran some Facebook
Okay.
ads to my Christmas romance with
Okay.
success. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I kind of think it can be a genre thing, because
Yeah.
the way Facebook targeting works too, with your
It's
who you can target. And yeah, I think
it's
that
a
makes a huge
lot
difference.
too, and it was getting too confusing for me
Yeah.
trying to do the two. Yeah.
Oh, it's a lot of work. Oh my
It's a
goodness, it's a
lot.
lot of work.
Marketing is a lot of work. You think
Oh my
writing the book
goodness.
is a lot of work, but then you
Yes.
have to market.
Yeah. And I actually really like marketing. I find it quite creative and fun, but it's all such a time suck. Like I could
Yeah.
just get sucked into one thing, and then it takes all my
takes
writing
a long
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Mark Darson's course is on my wish list, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to
I
get
will
on
say
that
I
someday.
am going to start experimenting a little bit with Pinterest, because
Oh.
there are tons of teachers, librarians,
Oh yeah.
parents on Pinterest. So, and I have heard some other authors, or some other kids book authors, are kind of doing the same, experimenting with it. And advertising on there is quite a bit cheaper than
Oh, okay. Well,
Amazon or
good luck.
Facebook. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing how that turns out.
Yeah.
All right. So if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice from when you began your author journey, what would it be?
Have patience. It is
Oh,
a
good one.
marathon, not a sprint.
Oh, that is huge.
Yeah, I've talked to so many other middle grade authors that are so frustrated because they have 1 or 2 books out, and they can't get their ads profitable. They can't get it rolling, and my series didn't really take off and get rolling until the third book was out.
Mm-hmm.
It just, that seems to be a number for a lot of people series in all genres. Like once that third book hits, people are kind of like, oh, this author's serious about this series. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna finish it. Yeah. So it kind of builds some trust, I guess, with readers. And part of advertising is having more books, because you don't advertise every single book. You advertise, or for me, you advertise the first book in the series,
Yeah.
and that book is what sells people into reading the rest of the series.
Yeah.
So they have to like your first book. You better make sure that first book is up to par.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great piece of
So,
advice.
yeah, patience. Patience. If you work hard and keep writing, especially if you only have one book out, don't worry about marketing very much. Just write the next book and then the next book, and then start learning more marketing is my advice.
Yes.
Because I tried marketing with just one book and it never really worked. You know,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, it just didn't really work when I had just the one book. So then I kind of took a break from trying and waited. I think it was until I took Brian Cohen's 5-day challenge right when I released the third book.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when things really, really got going, and I was able to be profitable with my ads. So.
Right. And I remember hearing when I first published my first baby book and then I started actually getting involved in the writing community, and hearing, even at that time, they were already talking about how you basically needed at least 5 books. Some people were saying 10 books to make a profit. Then there's like the 20 books to 50K thing. And I'm like, okay, that's way more than a profit. But I'm like, 20 books to make a living at this? That just seemed so out of reach. And, I think that can be really discouraging when you first start out to hear. But when I had my coaching session with Becca Syme last spring, she just really helped put that in perspective for me. And she was just like, it doesn't matter what career you got into, like you would have this training period of several years, and then you'd have several years of building, and like it would be at least 10 years before you really started to see success. And so, because I was really frustrated with how little my platform seemed to be doing, and I think I only had 3 books out at the time too. And she's like, I'm just looking here, and you've got the pieces in place, you just have a really baby platform. Yeah. And I think that's easy for us to forget. Like you're 5 years in, 6 years in. What are you?
No, 4 years.
4 years in.
Yeah.
And
I'm not making a living yet, just to be clear, off my books.
Yeah.
I'm making a profit, but I still need to edit and like.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And same here, right? Like I'm 7 years in, and yeah, I'm not making a living. I'm barely making a profit because I've published in so many genres and I haven't published that many books. And so, yeah, it's still a learning curve, but, I think you get to a point where there's a tipping point. Like for you, when you got to that third Starfell book out there, that was a tipping point for you where you start to see your growth accelerate. And I expect to see something like that happen with what I've got planned. I expect to see that happen in about a year for me. So yeah, like it's one of those things that I agree with you. Be patient and put in the work is probably what I just keep at. Like, just keep putting in the work. It can be really hard to maintain that faith and momentum, but if you keep doing it, Mark Leslie Lefebvre put a quote on his podcast once that I just adore. It's like, you only hear the success stories of the people who didn't give up.
Yeah. And I think that's really true, because like, for like what Becca Syme was saying, I took David Farland's, or I'm still taking his online courses for both craft and like kind of business planning side. And he said that even among traditionally published authors, it can be 7 years until, their break, because their first books are kind of like, testing the waters kind of books. Yeah.
Like it's insane to think. I mean, the amount of marketing you have to put into something for people to be excited about it the very first time it comes out of the gate is unrealistic for indies. So you have
It's unrealistic
to,
for a lot of traditionally published authors too.
yeah, I mean,
with
it doesn't happen anymore.
No, like with Harry Potter, I think, I can't remember, I was reading, but their budget to really ramp up that book, it was like $1 million or something. And that was back then, like in the late 90s. That's a lot of money. If we could only all have that kind of marketing budget, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And even nowadays, when they do put something like that, like Billie Eilish's memoir or whatever it was that was just published and just kind of flopped.
Yeah.
I feel bad for her actually, but it just goes to show you that like you still have to, you have to put in the time. You have to put in the work. So do you have anything coming up that you'd like to talk about? I'm sure you do.
Yes.
A very exciting month coming.
Yeah, March is going to be a great month. I think. I have, so on March 15th, the first audiobook with Podium is coming out for the Book of Chaos. So, and you can pre-order that now on Audible, and you can use your credits for that or buy it. And they are, since I already have the first 4 books written, it's not like a super rapid release, but it is every 2 months. So in May, the second book is coming out, in July the 3rd, and in September the 4th. Not sure about when the 5th is coming because I'm still working on it. But you know, so if you get the first book, it's not a long wait to get the second. So you can,
I'm super excited.
Thank you. Me too. And then I have the 4th book, The Curse of the Warlock, is coming out on March 29th. And that's just coming out in ebook and paperback and hardcover. Not the audiobook for that will be coming out in September. So, yeah.
Okay, very, very exciting. All right. So were you able to think of do you have an inspirational quote for writers that you would put on a mug? Our mug quote of the week.
Yeah, it's kind of for writers and everyone. I really like Thich Nhat Hanh. I don't know if you know him. He's like a Buddhist monk. He's done a lot of activism and peace work. But he said, our own life has to be our message. And I kind of feel like that really it applies to everyone in our personal lives, but it can apply to our writing as well. Like our writing is our message.
True. So, oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, cool. Well, this was really fun. Thank you so much for being my first podcast guest.
Thank you for having me.
Yay. Thanks for having coffee with me.
Tea. Afternoon tea. Yeah.
All right. And we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Jessica. I certainly did. I just adore her as a person, but her work, and also I'm just constantly inspired by Jessica's business savvy and the things that she's tried and willing to try. And yeah, she's a pretty amazing person. Anyways, after our interview was over, we realized we forgot a couple of things in the interview. No, what can I say? I'm out of practice with interviewing, and I have never done it for a podcast before. So anyways, I'm just going to include them right here. Specifically, where to find Jessica online was missed. So you can go to her website at jessicarenwickauthor.com to find more about her books. And you can sign up for her middle grade or romance newsletters. She keeps 2 separate newsletters, and they each have free Reader Magnet stories to go with them. And both of the stories are good. So I recommend them. And you can also follow her on social media. She is most active on Instagram, and she has 2 accounts. One is under Jessica Renwick Author, which is her main account, which she primarily promotes her fantasy in, but she also it's her writer's life kind of account. And then she has Jessica Ann Renwick Books, which is primarily to focus on her romance audience. And she does a lovely job with Instagram. It's so nice seeing her posts. They're always pretty, and she's so engaging in her posts. So And lastly, our question of the week this week is, what's a risky decision you've made about your indie author business that has paid off in unexpected ways? And you can leave a comment at tolenawinters.com/podcast episode 9. And I will put a link in the show notes, of course. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Please leave a comment, and if you have any questions or anything, Jessica can come and respond to them. And I hope you have a wonderful writing week, and we shall see you next week. Thanks for having coffee with me. Coffee and Real Talk for Writers has been produced by Talina Winters. The music for this podcast was written by Josh Rickard of joshrickardmusic.com. You can find episode show notes, leave a comment, subscribe, or if you're feeling generous, buy me a coffee at tolenawinters.com/podcast. And be sure to leave a review on the podcatcher of your choice. Tell your friends to come by too. The kettle's always on. So until next time, I hope you keep writing and keep it real. Thanks for listening. Bye.
The Book of Chaos was her first novel and the start of her fantasy series for middle grade readers, Starfell. Just like,
it's okay. We can start over.
You know what? I'm just going to reword that sentence a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds clunky.
It does a little bit.